Yo, what's good? It's Austin from MIDI Beats, and I just want to bring you guys a quick little video showing you guys how we do our drums, how we mix our drums, how do we get our kicks knocking, things like that. This video is not going to be too long just because I know there's already like a million videos talking about mixing your drums and stuff like that, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this. I'm just going to kind of run through our process. And a little disclaimer is we do use some third-party plugins. So first I'm going to show you guys those plugins and what we use, but then I'm also going to show you what I would personally do if I didn't have access to any third-party plugins. So just using stock plugins, I'll show you guys what I would do if I just had stock plugins. So first, I will say this is our sample that we made. I'm not going to be talking too much about that just because I don't want to have a super long video. I can make a separate video talking to you guys about the effects we use and how we make samples, stuff like that. But I will show you the plugins we use to make the sample. These are the three plugins we used: Ample Guitar, Analog Lab, and Arcade. And that's how we made the sample. The beat is called Prada. It's on our channel if you want to go listen to it. But I'm gonna show you guys what it sounds like right here. I'll show you the main part of the beat, like with all the drums in, so you get an idea what it sounds like. So you get the idea. Pretty hard to me. I like this beat a lot, but I'm gonna run through our process of how we mix our beats and how we get them to knock. Like I said, there's already a ton of videos talking about this, but we've had a few people ask us how we get our kicks and 808s to sound like they do. It's really, honestly, it's pretty simple. The first tip I can give is to make sure you pick good drum sounds that are already sounding good. In this beat, I used pretty much all drums out of MIDI Beats Rocket Volume 1 drum kit. So if you guys want that kit, you can check it out on our website, midibeats.com. Basically what I do to get the 808s loud and the kick and get everything how I want it is I just turn the drums up. It's pretty much that simple. As you can see here, I do a lot of my leveling right here in these volume knobs. Like as I make the beat, I just turn the 808 up, I turn the clap up. I left the hi-hat like it is and left everything like it is except for the kick. I turn it up. But like as you can see in here, I mean, these are all the drums right here. As you can see, the knobs aren't really touched much. I turn the open hats down a little bit, turn the hi-hats down a little bit, and yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. Like the main part is just leveling. And then as far as the sample goes, if you're using loops, if you're using third-party loops or your own loops like we did here, we turn it into an audio file. You just turn it down. And another thing I like to do is I'll just pull up the Pretty Parametric EQ2 and I'll turn the high pass on. I'll turn this all the way down, this little knob right here, and I'll just pull it over to about usually around 130, 150. Sometimes I like to pull it back to around 85. And then I'll use this second knob here and I'll just pull it down just to turn the bass down a little bit. But I don't want to cut the bass completely out because I do like I like the samples to have some life to it, because if you cut it all the way, the bass all the way out, it starts to sound a little dead in my opinion. I know a lot of people like to cut the lows all the way out, but me personally, I like to leave some in. But in this sample specifically, we pretty much mixed as we made it. So like the guitar, we'll probably take some bass out. The flute will probably leave as it is, but we'll just level it. And then same thing with the choir sample. We just pretty much leave it as is and just level it. I mean, that's really the main part. Another tip I can give that I do sometimes is side chaining your kick to your 808, so that every time your kick hits, your 808 gets turned down. And the way I do it is I'll come over here to another insert, an open insert. I'll add a Fruity Peak controller, and what you gotta do is you gotta get your kick, link it to whatever insert you did, and then go to that insert and unlink that insert from the master. That's just to make sure that the kick isn't hitting twice, so it's not doubling up the audio. And then you're gonna come over here to your 808 now, and you're gonna right click on the 808 knob and click on link to controller. Now this is where you got to make sure you do this right, is you got to click on peak control peak, and just now make sure you click on under internal controller, click on peak, and then you want to come down here to mapping formula where it says input, click right here and click on inverted, and then just click accept, and you'll come back over here to your peak controller and you want to adjust. So what I do is I turn this volume knob, I turn it to about like 12%. I turn the decay down all the way usually, or pretty close to all the way. And then the bass, you want to adjust. So as you can see, if you look at the 808 knob, the bass pretty much adjusts where the 808 starts. But since I like to level my 808 with these volume knobs, I put the bass at 20% so that it's right where it started. So that it's not adjusted, you know, like anything crazy like that. Just put it at 20% and then it'll be leveled. And then if you want to turn it up and down, I suggest doing it in here so that you don't have to mess with the bass. But that's just my suggestion. That's how I do it. But basically what this does, and I'll just show you, is as the kick hits, this knob will turn down as much as you tell it to. And that's what this volume knob is for, is to tell it how much to turn down when the kick hits. So I'll show you real quick what that looks like. So as you can see, every time the kick hits, the 808 turns down, and then when there's no kick, like right here, the 808 won't be touched. It'll just be like it is. I don't really have a reason for using this method, other than I just like how it sounds. I just like it. I don't always do this though. It just depends on the beat. It depends on the 808. Depends on the kick. A lot of people do this same technique, but they use fruity limiter so that it compresses the 808 as the kick hits. But I like to just turn it down because I don't want my 808 being compressed. The only effect I have on any of the drums is this fruity fast distortion, and basically I like to add this just to turn the kick up. Basically I like to use this just to turn the kick up. You can also do this in the actual sample. If you just come here, click on the sample, and then go to this toolbar, you can turn it up this way. What I like to do is add this fruity fast distortion on the channel, and I just turn the mix down all the way, and then I just mess with this preamp knob, and this one I have at about 85%. You can just mess with it and see how it sounds, but I'll show you the reason I do this and what it sounds like without it. So when you turn it off, as you'll see, the kick is really not punching through at all. I mean, it sounds alright, but it sounds like really quiet and dead, and the kick is not really hitting. But when you turn it on and turn it up, this is what it sounds like. So, as you can see, I mean, it is clipping, but I wouldn't really worry about that because I go over here to my master, and this is where a lot of things are added. But yeah, that's pretty much it. The only other thing I do is, as you can see, I have some panning. I pretty much use the same basic panning every time I pan. For the most part, I'll pan my hi-hats to the left a little bit if I pan them at all. And as for the percussion, right here I have it panned to the left as well, but I don't always do this. It just depends on what the percussion is and what it sounds like. As for the open hats, you see I like to pan them to the right if I pan them at all, and that usually stays the same. I usually do that most of the time. It's just to give it a variation from the hi-hat, because I like to pan the hi-hats to the left and the open hat to the right, so it gives it like a variation. I'm not really sure, it's just how I like it. And then the last thing is the snare. I like to usually pan the snare to the right as well, specifically like the side snares, not like my main snares. My main snares I'll just leave in the middle, but for the side snares I like to pan them to the right usually. And yeah, that's pretty much it for as far as that goes. And then this is where I start adding a few different plugins, would be right here in the master. So first things first, when I make my beat, I add a clipper at the bottom as the last plugin. I mean, you guys probably know what this does already if you've been making beats, but if you don't know, it basically acts like a limiter, except it doesn't smash your drums. It lets them breathe, it lets them punch through without your audio hitting over 0. So that's why I like using the clipper. I mean, everyone I know uses this clipper, not this specific clipper, but they use some sort of a clipper. A lot of people just like to use the Fruity Soft clipper, and that's right here, and it acts as the same as the classic clipper that I use. This is the TR5 classic clipper from T-Rax, if you want to check that out, but you don't really necessarily need it. I mean, as you can see my settings, I don't touch anything except the slope. That's basically the same as a threshold knob on the soft clipper. So the soft clipper, same thing. I just like to turn this up a little bit. When I was using this clipper, I would just turn it up to like 1.5, 2 dB, but you can mess with it as you want. I wouldn't really mess with the post too much. Maybe just the threshold mainly. Use one of these or another clipper plugin that you have. So I'll show you guys what that looks like on and off. So as you can see, when I turn the clipper off, the audio is clipping crazy. The next thing I do is I like to add a fruity parametric EQ, this EQ right here. First thing I like to do is I like to turn this treble knob up. I usually turn it up quite a bit, like about 3.5 dB. And then I come to this middle knob right here for the mids, and I turn that up about a dB. And then for the sub range, I turn that up about a dB as well. That's mainly just to give the beat a boost in these different areas. Specifically the highs, because I feel like this makes your hi-hat sound crispy, makes your sample really sound bright and really cut through without having to turn it up too loud. And yeah, that's the settings I use for this, and I pretty much always do this. So we'll turn this on and off and show you guys what it sounds like. So a real subtle difference, but to me the hats do sound crispier, clearer. Same thing with the sample, it makes it sound brighter and just really pulls out the highs. Next thing I use is a SSL compressor. This is from Waves. This is the G Master bus compressor. I don't always use this, but when I do use it, these are the settings I use. I turn the threshold all the way up so that the audio isn't getting over compressed. I don't want the compressor to start working at too low of a signal. I don't want it to start working down here at -12 or whatever. I want it to start, as high as it can. And then the attack, I like to put on the slowest setting. This is so that the drums can have some room to breathe, some time to breathe, and time to punch through. Because if I put the attack too fast, it'll grab the peak of the drums and it'll really smash them and make them sound really flat and dead. And so yeah, that's that. These settings are pretty much standard for all compressors for the most part, and this one just has some limited options. As you can see, like a lot of other compressors will have more customization. You can do different attacks, like the fruity compressor, same thing. It has pretty much all these knobs, but this compressor specifically is one that I like the sound of. If I didn't have this compressor, I don't know that I would use fruity compressor, because compression is not really necessary. This is just what I like to use. But if you do want to use compression, I would just follow these basic principles that I'm telling you, just to make sure your drums aren't being flattened or anything like that. Now you don't have to use compressor like I said, and you also don't have to follow what I'm saying, to be honest. This is just some suggestions that I have to make sure that your drums still punch through. Next thing I do is I put the ratio down to 2:1. This is the lowest ratio, so that it basically has the least amount of compression. The makeup knob, which is like the makeup gain, I don't really touch it. I just leave it as is usually, which is pretty much always at 3 or 2.5 dB. If anything, I would turn it down back to 0, but I would rarely ever turn it up any higher than it is. So the next knob I do is the release. Now, like the attack, I do the opposite on the release, because I want it to grab the audio as slow as I can and then release it as fast as it can. So that's pretty much the idea of that, is that I don't want this to be over compressed. I don't want it to stay compressed for very long. I just want it to slowly grab it and then let go immediately. And that's pretty much it. I mean, that's all the settings on the compressor. But like I said, I don't always use a compressor. It's not necessary to get a good mix. The only thing that I have on here that is necessary, in my opinion, is the EQ and the clipper. Everything else though is like the compressor and the ozone, not necessary. It's just something I like to use to add some flavor. So what it sounds like with and without it. So as you can see, again, doesn't do a ton, but it does bring pretty much all the audio up. It makes it sound louder. So I like the tone of this compressor. I just like how it sounds, but I don't always use it. And as you can see, the settings I have, the drums are still able to punch through without being super overly compressed. Last thing I do, and this might be a little bit different than some other people that use Ozone, I like to put my clipper above Ozone, and then I like to run the Master Assistant. The reason I do this is so that Ozone isn't mastering audio that's above 0. I like to have it right at 0 or whatever my clipper is at, so that when I run the assistant, it's at 0. These are the settings that it ended up being. A lot of the time, when I run the assistant, it turns this knob down, the sub. I pretty much always reset this knob because I don't like the bass being turned down. It could be wrong, but for me it's always worked, and I think the sound nowadays is pretty heavy bass, so I wouldn't want to turn my sub down any. The next thing is dynamics. It pretty much never has the dynamics. The only thing it uses is the dynamic EQ. And this one, sometimes I'll adjust this, but a lot of time I just leave it as is. If anything, I'll just turn these up a little bit so that it's not EQing as much, like so. I'll just do that. I'll just go through each one to kind of turn them up. But for the most part, I just leave them as is. And that's pretty much the plugins that it adds from the Master Assistant. And then for me, I like to add this imager on the end, and I just click here on this preset and I click on modern width, and yeah, I just leave that as is because I like how it sounds. Maybe pretty lazy, but I like the sound of it, so I just leave it. And sometimes I'll add a post EQ, and I'll click on the preset and I'll use clear bass just to make sure the 808 and the kick are really clear and they're up front and loud. But a lot of time I don't even use that. I just use these three. And when I'm done with this, and I'm done using Ozone, I'm done with the Master Assistant, I'll go back here and I'll actually put the Ozone back above the clipper so that the clipper will act as my limiter so that my audio doesn't clip above 0. When you run the assistant, it will add a limiter. It'll usually add this maximizer, which is a limiter, but I always take it off so that I can use the clipper as the limiter. That's just my personal preference, and this is what it sounds like with and without Ozone. So again, it's not doing a ton. It's just adding a little bit of flavor, a little bit of brightness. And yeah, that's pretty much all I do. You know, not too complicated, not a ton of mixing going on, not a ton of plugins, not a ton of crazy stuff. It's just really all about leveling and picking good sounds and turning up the drums that need to be turned up. Like I said, just leveling. That's pretty much it. I think I pretty much covered everything that we do, covered the whole process. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what you guys want to see in the future. If it's, you know, making samples, how to mix samples, how to put effects on samples and what effects we use and stuff like that. Definitely down to make videos on that and show you guys whatever you want to see. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Like I said, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, all that, @MIDIBeats. Leave a comment on what you want to see in the future. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.